Good evening, my dear viewers, and welcome to another Alliteration gaming video. My name's Levi, coming at you straight from the van this time around with another Star Wars Unlimited deck profile. And today, we're going to be taking a look at Rey, more than a scavenger, and her army of little green men. So I know set 2 has almost come to a close at this point, set 3 is right around the corner, and it almost feels weird to be making deck profiles at this point, but since the competitive season has kind of wound down a little and I've found myself more in a bit of a commentator role lately, I've been playing a lot of fun decks, and this is easily one of the most fun decks that I have played in set 2, and I'm really excited for some tools that it gets in set 3. So without further ado, let's dive into this Rey deck and see how we can take a bunch of little guys and make them more than meets the eye. Kicking things off with our leader, Rey's leader side here says that you can pay one exhauster to give an experience token to a unit with 2 or less power. Now this might not seem like an incredibly powerful ability right away, but the ability to kind of spread these little experience tokens far and wide and make like some little dudes like just pull way more weight than they were ever really designed to. There's a lot of awesome synergies with a lot of units in this deck that Rey feels really good paired up against. Her unit side, on the other hand, though, I think is where Rey really finds an identity, and that's as a stabilization machine. Rey flips on 6 resources as a 2/6, which is not powerful, but she's packing Restore 3 right on face, and I cannot understate how strong that is. Being able to heal 3 the moment that she comes out, and if they can't deal with her, just it's a really snowball effect type thing. Luke comes out on the next turn and then things just start getting really out of hand. Once Rey flips, it's all about that stabilization and grinding the game back into your favor from there. Now you're thinking though, of course they can deal with your 2/6 though, right? Well, when Rey attacks, you get to give an experience token to a unit with 2 or less power, including herself. So if you don't give it to something else, you can flip her right into essentially a 3/7 on attack that's going to restore 3. And that's really powerful. Anyone who's played this game knows how big of a difference there is between 6 and 7 health. So if you can flip her and then safely get that swing off to make her a 7 health unit, get that restore 3, hopefully get another swing with her next turn. Even if she dies on that next turn, she's pulling a lot of weight. Even if she dies the turn that she flips, if she got to swing restore 3 and then soak up 7 damage from attackers, very good. Rey is super awesome. Let's move Rey and our base to the side and start talking about our units, and we're going to kick it off with the best card in the deck, baby. 3 copies of Moisture Farmer. Moisture Farmer is a monster. This is a 1-drop 0/4 with Restore 2. Very unassuming at first, but with Rey, it's going to be instantly a 1/5, which again is still not scary, but it does say, like with that Restore 2, basically their turn 1 play finds no value in attacking you because you're just going to Restore 2 right off the bat. And then if you get to buff this once or even a second time, going up to a 2/6 or even a 3/7 Moisture Farmer is where the cap comes. Moisture Farmer is very good. Inside this deck, again, Rey unlocks a lot of power, especially in cards like 1-drops, because they're immediately going to come in with those 1/1 tokens. It's a lot like Grand Moff Tarkin was in set 1. Moisture Farmer is just kind of like, I don't want to say the glue that holds this deck together, but it is the very beginning of a very strong and very extensive restore engine that you're going to see here that kind of caps off with Rey and Luke in the super late game. That's not the only 1-drop we play though, because of course we're in heroism. We got to play 3 copies of R2-D2. R2-D2 is sweet. When you play him and when you swing with him, you get to just kind of scout the top card of your deck, and you can either slam it on the bottom or just leave it where it is. It's totally fine. This effect is like, it is strong. The filtering is really good, but really we're playing R2 in here because since he's a 1-drop, we get to Rey right off the bat, and he's just a 2/5 with a relevant ability, and that's very good. And again, if you want to find another token on him later on, he can become a 3/6, and then he can start like taking out units, and that's why I think R2 gets really frightening. Now into our first actual 2-drop, we're playing 3 copies of Quill. Now the double blue Reys are going to play this guy because he always draws a card. This guy doesn't always draw a card in this deck, but he is good. Now when I say draw a card, when he swings, you essentially mill yourself 1, and if you mill something that shares the color of your base, you get to add it to your hand. So we pick up the green cards in this deck, which is really good for some of our very relevant cards. At the same time though, sometimes he does flip a good blue one, like a Luke Skywalker, and we're really sad. But he's also just a 2/3 with Restore 1, and I don't hate that at all. I think he's the most flexible of our turn 1 plays, but I still quite like him in the deck. He's a nice source of card advantage that when you're playing a deck of, you know, such little guys, card advantage is pretty important to come by once you start playing like, you know, more than 1 card a turn. Next up in our opening plays, we have 2 copies of Regional Governor. Now I think this card's super underrated in Rey. I don't think I see enough of the double blue Reys playing this card. So it's 2 cost 1 for, but when you play it, you get to name a card, and then until this card leaves play, your opponent can't play the named card. So when you're opening, you know, this is not bad for saying things like, you know, Resupply or Super Laser Technician against those decks. If you're going to go into the 4 resource turn against it's like a double color deck, you can name like, you know, Cunning or Aggression or any of those. This card does have really good early game properties, and it's just annoying. And if it gets to the point where you called something really well and it's actually messing your opponent's game plan up, turning this into a 2/5 on the next turn, your opponent might just not find a good window to deal with that eventually, and that can be really strong. And then late game, being able to, like, you know, Uwing into this and then naming like the really strong 8-drops, you know, Snoke, Super Laser Blast, stuff like that, it's really, really good. Sometimes it's honestly not hard to maneuver this unit into a place where they have to waste a really valuable removal spell on your 2-drop 1/4, and that just feels fantastic when it happens. And then for our final turn 1 play, we just have a single copy of Clone Deserter. This guy's just a 1-drop 2/3 with Restore 1, but he does have a bounty to draw a card. So your opponent gets to draw a card when you kill him. Granted, he's a 3/4 right off the bat in this deck, which is really strong, and for a while I was just like all in on 3 copies of this guy, but there's just some matchups where you actually really don't want to see that that draw card happen for your opponent. Now going into our 3-drops, this is really where the meat of the deck lies. Our 3-drops are very, very strong. First one, we got 3 copies of Sario Peacekeeper. This is like one of the reasons to play Green Rey right here. Sario Peacekeeper is a 3-drop 1/5 with Raid 2 and Restore 2. So he swings for 3 and he restores 2, and you can buff him up to 3 times. You can buff him all the way up to a 3/7 with tokens, and then he swings for 5 with the Raid 2. That's super strong. Even just putting 1 token on this guy, 6 health is seriously hard to remove, and that Restore 2 is big. Again, we have already a really hefty amount of Restore in our turn 1 plays, and then our turn 2 plays are just going to carry that Restore momentum forward. And the other person who's going to carry that Restore momentum forward is 3 copies of Yoda. Now, Yoda's just awesome, man. This guy's at 2/4, so you can buff him 1 time, again up to a 3/5, very relevant numbers. He also packs Restore 2, and when he dies, you get to choose any number of players and make him draw a card. You're obviously just going to choose yourself. So yeah, between the Peacekeeper and the Yoda, you just have 6 3-drops that both Restore 2, and that's really good. They're both great targets for buffing. Peacekeeper has a little more stats on him sometimes, but Yoda being able to draw a card is really strong. He's a nice little draw engine. Against the control decks, you're just going to like mulligan for Yoda and search for Yoda and filter for Yoda all day. He's so value. Continuing with 3-drops, we've got 3 copies of Village Protectors. These guys are sweet. These guys are the ultimate, like, just annoying little stall card. 2/2 Shielded Sentinel for 3 is really good. You don't really buff these super often, to be honest. These guys are really mostly just here to chump hits, but sometimes when they have like a 3 health guy that you know needs to swing into them, a cheeky little buff on here, letting them take out something on the backswing is really good. Otherwise, they're just a Shielded Sentinel, man. They soak up 2 moves. Now, speaking of Sentinels, we haven't seen any space units left, so let's finally kick off with our first one, and that's going to be 3 copies of Concord Dawn Interceptors. Once again, another Sentinel, this one being a 1/4 Sentinel in space that also gets +2 power while it's defending, so it doesn't really hit for anything unless you start putting some tokens on it, which you can get this eventually up to, you know, a 3/6 if you try hard enough, and then it claps back for 5. That's really, really good. But even unbuffed, this just shuts down a lot of strategies really quickly and puts a lot of protection in your corner. I really like the Concord Dawn Interceptors. And you're gonna kind of notice the theming, right? We've got 6 Restores in our 3-drops and then 6 Sentinels are 3-drops, which is really sweet. Now going into our Tech 3-drops, quite literally, is 2 copies of Tech. Tech is a powerhouse, man. This card is insane. A 2/5 3-drop that can smuggle for 4 and then gives everything in your resource row a smuggle with a +2 cost. Oh my god, Tech is so crazy. Right off the bat, he's got an above average smuggle rate at only 1 more, which is just super duper crazy. But then late game, being able to just turn your whole resource row into smuggles, you start smuggling Uwings and Lukes that you had to put away early, you start smuggling choice removal spells exactly when you need them. You're gonna resource Tech almost every single time and then just smuggle them out when things get like a real late game and things get real grindy. This card is an absolute monster. Tech is so good. I used to only play 1, but you really want to see him in some matchups, and in some matchups you want to see both of them. And sometimes you will just go through your whole deck like that. And then the last 3-drop that we have is just a single copy of Admiral Akar. I just like this little guy as a one-of. Sometimes he's like a really impactful unit on like the 4 or 5 resource turn, and you can get like a sweet removal out of him. You can start putting some buffs on him after that, and he hangs around with that Restore 1. It's really good. You can U-wing into him and start going like really wide. Like you can grab him in 2-drops and get 3 damage right off the bat. That's if you had no current board as well, right? Akbar's just really sweet. He's just a dope one-of. Moving into the 4-drops, we've got got 2 copies of modded Cohort. This was a real late addition to the deck. I just realized that like once I swapped over from ECL into the 30 hit point base, there was no ambush in this deck. So like once I lost the board, it was really hard to get it back because you're just putting these little guys down and you're trying to buff them, but you need time to buff them. And if they just get shot before you can do anything with them, it just feels really bad. So the modded cohorts just offer a little bit of surprise stabilization, being able to swing for 4. They don't really, they only clap back for 2 if someone fights them, but 99% of the time, you're just gonna swing this into something with 4 power and it's just gonna do a little bit of a trade there. And you can put a token on it if it does like happen to hang around longer than it should. Also, sometimes you just need like a surprise removal to save you off of your Uwing. So like not only is Akbar that, these are also like extra copies of that sort of, right? And then to round out the 4 drops, yeah, we've only got 4 drops. There's 2 copies of Bright Hope in this deck. There's a 4-drop 2/6, another Sentinel in space, and when you play it, you're allowed to bounce one of your ground units to the hand and draw a card. So this one's pretty sweet. Sometimes like certain guys will accumulate damage on them and you want to just pick them up and draw a card. If like you put the village protectors down, they lose their shield, you pick them up, you draw a card. You need to get a clone deserter off the board. Something, you know, you've got a buffed up like R2 or something, it's taking some damage, you want to just pick it back up and draw a card. A lot of that ability is really good in a lot of the grindy matchups, and then in the aggro matchups, it's a 6 health Sentinel in space. That's just very good. You can put a token on it, it's a 3/7, and that's suddenly significantly more problematic. You know, A-wings and red 3s can't go into it without dying. Super duper crazy in those aggro matchups. Love Bright Hope. And next is the 6 drops. You're thinking, well, we've only got 4 drops, and there's like no 5 drops. The curve on this deck is weird because most of the time on your 5 resource turn, you really don't mind playing like a 3 and a 2, or like 2 2s and like using like a Rey buff, or a 3 and a 1 and then using a Rey buff. Like most of them in those early turns, you do really want to start going wider just so you can become harder to address. So really not having like big units like that is not a big deal. And also there's just not a lot of fantastic ones you want to run. We'll go over some of them in the end for like cards that didn't quite make the cut, but realistically, these are the cards you want in your deck, kind of adjacent of costs. So going into our 6 drops, we have one of my favorite cards in the deck. This is General Reon. This guy is awesome. This guy is a 6 cost 5/7, and when you play him and when you swing with him, you can give something Sentinel, or if it's already a Sentinel, it gets an EXP token. So this guy is really sweet because you can take like your Protectors or Interceptors and Bright Hopes and just buff them up with more and more tokens. Or you can just, you know, most of the time you're just gonna play him and then make him a 5/7 Sentinel, and that's really good. On 6, that's really, really big. Even without the ECL, Reon is a total boss and really, really, really helps you go into that flip turn with something very powerful to do. Now for a bit more of a situational 6 drop, we're actually playing 2 copies of the Mandalorian. I love this card. I think this card's really, really sweet. It's really thematic and awesome. And it doesn't really have a home in many decks, but I think it goes quite well in this deck. This is another 6 drop Sentinel, but he is an innate Sentinel, unlike Reon. He's a 5/6, so he's a little weaker, but when you play him, you can heal everything on a 2 or less drop and then give it 2 shields. Now this is really big for a lot of reasons. First of all, if you get a 3/6 R2 going and then you can just, you know, shield him up, double shielded, 3 power, he's gonna swing to the moon or he's gonna start killing guys, and that's awesome. If you have a moisture farmer that's buffed up, putting those shields on, keeping that restore 2 around permanently is so big. If you have a really problematic regional governor, putting 2 shields on it, if they don't have the right removal spell, dude, that card's just gonna sit there and infinitely lock them out of whatever the best thing is at that time. The Mandalorian is really sweet in this deck. He's got a lot of really, really, really great targets. He's great at protecting the clone deserter too if you don't want your opponents drawing cards. He's just sweet. He's really sweet. He's one of the most fun cards you get to play in this deck. And when he like, when he gets a value play, oh my god, he really gets the value out. Finally, we're gonna get into the best cards in this deck, the true powerhouses, and that's the 7 drops. We've got 2 really, really big 7 drops in this deck. The first one we're gonna look at is, of course, guys, it's Blue Heroism. We need 3 copies of Luke Skywalker. Luke the Duke himself. Oh my goodness. 7 drop 6/7 with a big fat restore 3. And when you play him, something's going to get -3/-3. Or if one of your friends has fallen this phase, -6/-6. Luke is crazy. If a Luke comes down, gets a choice kill, and gets a swing the next turn, the game is almost always over. If your opponent cannot claim and immediately kill Luke, that hit them for 6 and heal you for 3, that 9 damage swing, Luke is crazy. And at 7 health, he's really hard to kill unless you're packing really specific removal. A Maul can trade into him, but dies on the crackback if there's not something to pass the damage to. Luke's just insane, and he's really crazy in this deck because since we're blue-green heroism, we get to play Uwing reinforcements, and being able to tutor Luke is really strong, and he's just, oh man. Yeah, Luke's crazy. There's not much complexity to say about Luke. And then our other gigantic unit, not the other 7-drop, obviously that's Uwing. Our other gigantic unit is we got 2 copies of Home 1. Home 1 is crazy in this deck. Home 1 lets us go wide and then just get ridiculously paid for it. This is an 8-drop 7/7 with Restore 2. Everything else gets Restored 1, and when you play it, you get to play a Heroism unit for 3 less from your discard pile. That effect is crazy for so many reasons. First of all, we can get any of our 3-drops back for free. Bring in an Akbar and nuke something. Bring in a Yoda to draw more cards. Bring in either a ground or a space sentinel. Bring in a tech when you're in that late game, and now tech's gotta die, but the home one's also gotta die. If they kill the home one, tech one smuggles another home one in next turn. Gets so crazy. But it's for 3 less, not a 3-drop. So if you're on 9, 10 resources, if you're on 9, you can start bringing back 4-drops like the Cohort of the Bright Hope. If you're on 11 resources, you can revive your 6-drops. If you're on 12 resources, home one can bring back a Luke, and that's just crazy daisy. That sounds like a insane situation to be in, but this deck grinds, guys. And let me tell you, sometimes I've had home ones bringing Lukes back from the grave, and it's super duper sweet. Reusing your techs is probably the biggest thing when you're in a super grindy matchup. If you need to save your life, the Sentinels come in. Home one's just crazy. And then yeah, everything else getting Restore 1. So many of these guys already have Restore 1 or 2, and it just, oh man, it makes the healing get crazy out of hand. Home one is a huge value play. It's kind of like the Darth Vader for our deck, where it comes in and gives us some you know, board stabilization, brings the advantage back on our side, but it's also significantly more threatening because it hits for 7. It's kind of the same thing as Luke. If a home one comes down, gets a really relevant revive, and then you get to actually swing with it next turn, hit you for 7, Restore 2. That again, another, just like Luke, another 9 health shift. Home one's crazy powerful. Now that's going to be it for our units. We do play a small amount of events in this deck, but this is a very, very unit-based deck, and the events are really, really straightforward, guys. We're literally just playing triple Fell the Dragon, triple Rivals Fall, and then triple Uwing. Now, to not like necessarily speed through these, we'll set the Uwings aside for now. We just play this removal package because I think triple Fell the Dragon, triple Rivals Fall is just a really good catch-all to essentially get rid of anything that you need. Fell the Dragon is our instant answer to things like Snokes, Avengers, Devastators, Reinforcement Walkers, Fett's Fire Sprays, just anything that's big that we don't want to deal with and we don't want to waste our units swinging into. Even though they can get a lot of defense and shielding and Sentinels and all that jazz, our units in this deck still don't hit incredibly hard. If there's a big thing in the way, our units are not very good at taking it out. So triple Fell the Dragon gets rid of any just super big stuff, and then Rivals Fall is just kind of like 3 more get rid of super big stuff, but also it hits leaders, which, given that everyone is so gung-ho on Boba with Boba armor right now, obviously it's a ridiculously powerful situation. Having Rivals Fall, it's just a catch-all, and that's what I really wanted for the removal package in this deck, is just 6 cards that are going to pretty much take care of anything, everything, you know, have a plan to kill everyone you meet type of situation, and that's why we kind of play these 6. And then the final 3 cards in this deck is just 3 copies of Uwing Reinforcements, and this card single-handedly is why I wanted to play Green Rey, because I think that just playing all of these little guys and Uwinging them in is so much fun. If you don't know what Uwing does, it looks at the top 10 cards. You can grab up to 3 units with a combined cost of 7 or less. So you can grab a 7-drop, you can grab a 4 and a 3, 2 3s and a 1, a 3 and 2 2s, a lot of different combinations, but Uwing is obviously super good in this deck because of how low our curve is. When we're grinding out really hard, the power of Uwing is not necessarily putting numbers on the board, but it's just turning 1 card into 3 and basically demanding a super laser blast every single time, and that's really strong. But it goes further than that. The utility is what really makes Uwing so crazy, because you can search for specific pieces you're looking for. You need Sentinels to save you? Uwing can potentially grab you a ground and a space Sentinel at the same time, or 2 space Sentinels, or it can go and grab a Yoda if you're grinding and you want to draw more cards. It can find your Akbars if you just need a big ping. It can go grab your techs if you need to start grinding things out. It can go tutor a regional governor, but also it can just grab our really sweet 6-drops, which most of the time a lot of decks don't run many 1-drops. So grabbing 6-drops with Uwing doesn't feel great, but in this deck, it's different. You can grab a 1-drop and a 6-drop because we have so many 1-drops. You can grab Moisture Former or R2 or the Clone Deserter and then grab the Mandalorian and shield them up. It's really sweet. Or if, you know, sometimes you're just sitting there without a Luke in your hand and they just busted your guy and you need a -6/-6 right now, slam your Uwing down. 9 times out of 10 it's going to find a Luke if you don't already have one by that point in the game. So like realistically, it's like 3 extra copies of Luke in your deck when you need them. It's just, oh my god. Uwing is so good. It's so much fun. I think Uwing is one of the coolest cards in Star Wars Unlimited's card pool, and it's really, really fun to just like airdrop in all these little weenies and go get them. Or, you know, call in the big hero Luke the Duke to come save the day. And that's going to be our 50 card main deck, guys. I will discuss sideboard options just a little bit, but first I want to go over some cards that just didn't quite make the cut. Starting from the top up, Redemption I think is really solid, but we have so much minimal healing in this deck that I don't think this card really saves us on 8 the way it saves other blue heroism decks, and I think I just like home one way more. As far as alternate 6 drops, I played around with the Skirmisher a lot. Just again, I was talking about how the deck had like no ambush. It having a little bit of ambush, especially more that you could grab off of Uwing, was nice. And the 2 drops that this can grab are really utility. I just think I like our like 5 Sentinel package here a little better because I really wanted to play a Sentinel alongside Rey all the time. When I was talking about how they're not being really good 4s and 5 drops, I mean it, guys. There's really not a lot that I would consider. The closest one that I would really want to consider is Rey Unit, just because it's a Rey deck and I want to play Rey Unit and I love this art. But we have like no non-heroism guys in this deck, so Rey really just doesn't make it, especially not without ECL. Trust me, guys, I wish she was better. Other 4 drops that I was playing around with included things like Rose Tico and the Nema Constables. Buffing Rose and then like buffing her again on swing was really cool, but when I took ECL out the deck, it was kind of the nail in the coffin for her. And the Constables were fine. I just kind of ended up valuing the ambush a little bit over more like Sentinel redundancy, although making this a 3/7 Sentinel was tight. To talk about 2 drops a little bit, for a long time I was running the Restored Arc over Queel. They're effectively the same, except Queel draws a card sometimes, although this is a space unit, but I found that I wasn't really having trouble that much with early space because of all the Sentinels, or if someone's getting aggressive in space early, and I'm not in space, it means I'm playing all these ground restore guys, and it just doesn't matter. So I just kind of prefer the Queel, especially because stabilizing ground in this deck's a little more important. And then the last thing to talk about is just ramp. I played around with Resupply and then Spark of Hope and then both and one or the other, and I really just didn't like any combination of them. Spark of Hope always just felt a little too awkward to force when I really needed it to work. The situationalness of it was not worth the -1 resource against Resupply. And then Resupply was also okay, but ramping to Rey is just not incredibly relevant because you're probably already restoring a lot early on. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but you're restoring a lot early on, and you really need to have like some guys when you flip Rey. I mean, she can buff herself, but I really just wasn't very impressed by Resupply. I kind of had no problem comfortably curving in this deck normally, and then I don't have them in my hands, but I know a lot of the Rey decks are going to play things like, you know, Kanans and Obi-Wans and Jedi lightsabers and forces with me and stuff like that. Kind of that whole force package as a whole. I couldn't really find room for it in this deck. I wanted to be a lot more unit-based. I kind of had a bit of a plan here, and a lot of that just didn't really fall into it. However, I do think things like Jedi Lightsaber, things like Forces with me, they're obviously really good on Rey. They have diminishing returns on other Force users, especially with, you know, just being vulnerable to removal. So I kind of just wanted to build this as a bit more of a insulated, consistent unit-based deck. But I don't think those 4 strategies are bad in any Rey deck, truly. But lastly, I just want to breeze through some really quick sideboard options for you guys. Making openings are really good if you see a lot of 3/2s in game 1, or like lurking TIE Phantoms and stuff. Traitorous is good into anyone buffing things. Also, TIE Phantoms are like, you know, putting lightsabers on Yodas or stuff like that. Devotion is really good in the aggro matchups, sticking this onto something like a Peacekeeper or a Yoda, making them nearly invincible unless they want to use like ECL Poe into it, or putting this on Rey. Really, really, really great stuff. Scanning Officer is a really good tag out for something like Queel, is probably your weakest 2-drop, or, you know, if you're like against aggro and regional governors, maybe not important, although calling Poe and Wrecker with regional governor is pretty good. And then lastly, Takedown is just kind of like some alternate removal if you feel like you're, you know, not in a matchup where you want rivals fall, like you really don't ever care about killing their leader, you know, with this kind of an effort. I would always swap these out for some takedowns and just have more flexibility in your removal. And that, guys, is going to be it for our little Green Rey Weenie Rush send in the little green men deck. This deck is so much fun to play. I don't know if it's going to change a whole lot going into set 3. I think the concept is still very fine and very solid. It's still quite good against pretty much all forms of aggro, and it has a lot of legs against other mid-range matchups. The Restore pulls so much weight, and when you're fighting against control, the grind advantage you get from a lot of things like Yodas and home ones and techs is all, and of course, you know, the almighty Uwing just being like a 1-for-3 sometimes. Really, really great stuff all around. This deck is really versatile. It's an absolute blast to play, and you should totally try it out. And if you do, and you find other things that you like instead inside of it, let me know in the comments section down below. All I can say for now, though, guys, is I cannot wait for Twilight of the Republic. I cannot wait to put Admiral Akar's in here, and it's going to be a fantastic time. Until then, though, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.